platform. I'm John Bachman. Also going to bring in now Javier Manjarres, the managing editor of SharkTank.com, and Ben Wikler of the Washington director of MoveOn.org, and also host of The Good Fight. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us. So we've been talking about debates here on the show a little bit today. This one in Kansas was very interesting, to say the least here. Javier, I want to ask you this. You know, Pat Roberts is in a little bit of trouble right now, but he's also had a lot of Republicans coming to his aid from all over the Republican political spectrum, everybody from Sarah Palin to Jeb Bush. Is he the guy who can really unite the Republican Party?
Well, I disagree with you. I think he's in big trouble, and that's why he has all these people coming in to support his candidacy. Look, for him to have to revert to this wedge issue, which is abortion, it speaks of his desperation. I think he's in big trouble. I think he's going to lose this race to Greg Orman, regardless of his support of abortion, being that it is Kansas and this is pretty much a red state. But I don't think he's the guy, and I think he's going to wind up losing to Orman.
Well, Javi, we actually agree on that issue. I do agree with you. He's in big trouble. But Ben, I wanted to ask you, of course, you know, Pat Roberts is in trouble, but Orman is an independent, and he says he's going to caucus with whomever wins the midterm, whether it's the Republicans or Democrats. But what's your take as a progressive, a Democrat, on this issue? How are you guys viewing Greg Orman?
You know, it's interesting. Greg Orman might caucus with the Republicans. He'd be someone who, at MoveOn.org, we'd be opposing the policies he's voting for. But I can tell you this. He seems a lot better than Pat Roberts. Pat Roberts at this point has been in Washington for 17 years. He doesn't even own a house in Kansas. And I think for the people of Kansas, this is a choice between a Washington insider and a Kansan, you know, somebody who's going to be an independent voice for their state. Now, you know, I can't tell you whether I'll wind up being happy that Greg Orman's elected or not. But I can tell you that, you know, and from what I can tell, most people in Kansas will be pretty happy to see Pat Roberts go down. He represents everything that's wrong with the system right now.
Ben, is it, you know, does it make you, you know, I guess, do you see this as an advantage every time a Republican candidate tries to use this as a wedge issue in one of these elections? Do you think this is advantageous or disadvantageous, I should say, because we're not looking at a Democrat in this race, but we're looking at a Republican, disadvantageous to Republicans?
Well, the politics of abortion in this country are kind of at a standstill. People know what they think. People have been debating and arguing and fighting very passionately on both sides of this issue, you know, for decades now. And at this point, it's kind of something that a Republican like Pat Roberts reaches for when he's got no arrows left in his quiver. I think, you know, as Javier said, it doesn't look like an issue that's going to be the central issue in this race. It's fundamentally a referendum about whether to send this guy back to where he lives. You know, Pat Roberts could stay in Washington, D.C. without representing Kansas in the Senate. Most people in D.C. are not Kansan senators. It's not clear why he's running for this term, but I don't think he's going to have another opportunity to claim he's from Kansas. There won't be a fourth campaign for this guy.
Now, Javier, do you suggest that the Republican Party on its platform move to the left on this issue because you say it's not a good idea to use it as a wedge issue, or should they just not talk about it at all?
I've always stated that the Republican Party should stay away from this type of issue, like abortion or immigration reform. But look, he brought it up because he's got nothing else left. This shouldn't have been the issue. He should have never had to bring up the abortion issue. His campaign, if it was a viable campaign, should have been in front of his opponent a long time ago. He should have been winning at least by 5 or 6 percentage points. But again, it speaks to his campaign and what it lacks. And first of all, I didn't know Ben was a progressive. It's unthinkable.
Well, let's talk about this, something else which might signal it's a sign of desperation, guys. And we got a break coming up in about a minute, so we'll continue this conversation. But during that debate, Senator Roberts also linked Ebola and the outbreak to the rise of ISIS and border security. Javier, was that a cringeworthy moment for you?
Look, again, desperation on his part, because you see this coming from the Democrats and blaming Republicans for Ebola, just like Barbara Streisand just did the other day, blame Republicans for this Ebola outbreak around the world or in the United States. Again, desperation on the parts of Roberts, and you know what? He deserves to lose. If he's going to use these tactics, if this is all he's got left, then he deserves to lose.
All right, well, Ben, we'll get your response to this coming up and very quickly, but we do have only about 20 seconds left, so I want to give you more time than that. We'll talk about this, the politicization of Ebola. I can barely say it. It's not something you want to think about, but it is happening. We'll talk a little bit more about that aspect of the midterms coming up after this short commercial break. John Bachman sitting in for J.D. Hayward today. We'll be back with Javier Manjarres and Ben Wikler right after this.